And hi to my friend Howard Beck, with whom I covered the Lakers back to back to back. I spent more time with you, easy guys, than I did with Rich for many, many years. Calm down, all of you. This is a family program. Thank you very much. Yeah, Howard and I literally, we flew on planes together. We sat there and we did the dance. No, he never drove with me. Okay. You never drove with me. Did you, Howard?
I don't think so. No, you probably had some fancy limo service. That
there we go, Howard.
You know what? I really did because Fox Sports Net really loved paying the big bucks for all the fancy bells and whistles. I did have at one point a Saab 900 turbo convertible, and I remember coming out of practice one day and Shaq saw the car and he tried to get in it and he couldn't sit in the front seat. He's like, "Well, if I had this car, I would take out the seat." I was like, please don't ruin my car. Hi, Howard. Good to have you here.
Suzy, great to see you again. Good to be here.
Always fun to start an interview with you this way. All right, here's the question we have today. With all the ascending stars in the NBA, do you have to win a championship to be crowned a superstar?
I'm going to say no. I'm not in the rings, ZZZZ rings culture sect. I don't really believe in that. We have seen plenty of superstars over the decades who are all-time greats, and we all know they're all-time greats, and we all know that under different circumstances, especially if they weren't blocked by Michael Jordan maybe in the 90s, or blocked by Tim Duncan for parts of the 2000s, or Shaq and Kobe, or now blocked by LeBron and Steph Curry. There are other guys who could have broken through. So I don't hold that as some absolute standard, but it's interesting because we are in this moment where, Steph Curry and LeBron, who have been the standard bearers in the face of the league, that kind of mythical title that we love to use, they're nearing their horizons, whenever those may be. And so we're looking to Anthony Edwards, and we're looking to Luka Doncic, and we're looking at Jayson Tatum. And, let's even throw Tyrese Halliburton in there because, hey, he's got his team in the conference finals. We are looking around and saying who's next. And you don't have to win a championship right off the bat to clinch that status. You need to be an absolute stud athletically, of course. You need to win a lot of games. You need to be in a lot of postseasons. You need to have moments. It helps if you have a lot of charisma, as some of them do. But the rings part of it, I feel like it's more part of the legacy discussion, Hall of Fame discussion. But it's, again, I don't think you have to have it to clinch that status as one of the faces of the league. But there's certainly an opportunity for some of the young players I just mentioned to go ahead and grab that in the next few weeks, which certainly helps the cause.
I mean, we've had a great time watching the comedic stylings of Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns after their win. But as we look ahead at this series, how competitive can they be against Dallas? How do you like this one?
It's a really fascinating series, right? Because the Timberwolves haven't been this far in 20 years, and the current stars were, probably in the proverbial diapers at the time, or not very far beyond that, if anything. And the Mavericks, they made a conference finals a couple years ago against the Warriors. I don't think anybody thought they were really ready to break through then. They might be ready to break through now. But this is one of those series where you look at it and you could talk yourself in circles as to who should be the favorite or how long this is going to go. This is an opportunity for Luka in particular, right? He finished third in the MVP voting. He's been a perennial MVP candidate for the last several years. And he's got a phenomenal co-star now in Kyrie Irving, who a lot of us, certainly I, was skeptical that pairing was going to work, and it's worked fabulously. That's an incredible and very lethal 1-2 punch. They've got some great role players and defenders around them. So that all said, the Mavericks are they're a little younger in their process, right? Like Kyrie just got there, 14 months ago or whatever it was. This is their first full season together. Derek Lively, their starting center, is a rookie. Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington, who we've all raved about how great a contribution they've made since the trade deadline, got there at the trade deadline. So they're still a little new. The Wolves, on the other hand, this is 2 full seasons now with Rudy Gobert. This is multiple seasons with Towns and Anthony Edwards. That core has been together for a bit. Their coach has been there. Everybody's been in place. If I have to pick, and I hate picking, I lean toward the Wolves in this series only because I think there's a little more continuity and just time together. The chemistry is established, but also they've got size, right? Like that Towns-Gobert front court. is a beast. Just ask Nikola Jokic, who just had to wave goodbye a couple days ago. And I do think it's going to be really interesting to see Lively and Gafford, who have just feasted at the rim off of Luka lobs in particular. Are they going to get those same opportunities when you've got 2 7-footers, standing around the paint?
Yeah, and Jaden McDaniels and Karl Anthony Towns and Naz Reid. I mean, you're seeing that when Anthony Edwards talked about that. When he had a slow game offensively, he could trust his players around him to pick up where he left off. I mean, we saw that happen effectively. So if we take that into consideration, how do you like their game versus the Dallas game?
I think the first thing I'm really interested to see is, I assume it's going to be Jaden McDaniels on Luka, but it's probably going to have to be a lot of people on Luka. Anthony Edwards, in the wake of that Game 7 win, was already talking about, and I love hearing this from a young star, right? Who's like, here's this guy, he's got all this game, all these skills. Anthony Edwards is, going to throw 20, 25, 30 points on the board, and in creative ways. He's explosive, he's skilled, he's got great footwork. But the first thing he's telling the, I think it was the TNT crew on Sunday in the wake of that win was, and Kyrie's my assignment.
That's it.
I can't wait to go check Kyrie. And he boasted about, locking down Jamal Murray in the second half of Game 7. That's just awesome when you hear a young player just really enthused about the defensive assignment. And I think Anthony Edwards, he's a great defender. If he can lock up Kyrie and the Mavericks can the Wolves can muster enough defense to throw at Luka, it's going to be a really tough uphill battle for the Mavericks, right? Because all of their scoring is generated by those 2 stars. And the Timberwolves were, I think, number 1 or number 2 in defense all year. And they have the personnel to stymie just about anybody. Again, ask the Denver Nuggets, the defending champs. And so this is going to be a really tough test for the Mavericks, but I don't rule them out.
And it's funny, I just looked it up. Kyrie's 32, Anthony Edwards is 22. So he definitely grew up watching him and thinking to himself, you must have imagined like he's boxing with himself, trying to think about who he's going to match up against. And then it's probably Kyrie back then, and it's Kyrie right now. We talked to Christopher Russo in the first hour about Kyrie and who he's become here in Dallas. What do you think of this metamorphosis of Kyrie Irving as he continually seems to reinvent himself?
It's really fascinating, Suzy, because at the time that Kyrie forced his way out of Cleveland, I just, like, my jaw dropped. Like, we were already firmly into this era of superstar empowerment and guys moving around more than we'd ever seen before. And I understood it and I support it. But I'd never seen a player decide, I don't want to be with the defining player of my generation who I've gone to 3 finals and won a championship with. I want to be somewhere else. And he ends up in Boston, and it doesn't go well. And it goes pretty badly, in fact, for a couple of years. And then he lands in my backyard in Brooklyn with Kevin Durant. And due to all kinds of circumstances that we do not need to relive or relitigate, it does not go well here in Brooklyn either. By the time the Mavericks traded for Kyrie Irving last year, there were very, very few teams in the NBA who really wanted to take a chance on him. And it was viewed as a risk, for sure. All that talent notwithstanding, and everybody acknowledges his talent and everybody admires his talent, but there was a risk because of his personality, because of things that had happened on court and off. And ever since getting to Dallas, Kyrie Irving has been, damn near perfect as a player, as a teammate, as just a general citizen. There has been nothing really to complain about. There have been no red flags. There have been no distractions. And unlike all those years ago when he forced his way out of Cleveland, where it seemed like maybe he wasn't comfortable having to play the co-star role with LeBron, with somebody who was, a bigger, brighter star, he seems comfortable with that now. More than that, like you've seen even in this postseason run, there's times where it's like, he's got 9 or 10 assists and he's not scoring much, or he's got 12 assists and he's only scoring 9 points or whatever. There was a game like that just a week ago, I think. And that he's comfortable being in more of an opportunistic scorer, not needing to dominate the ball, not worrying about numbers. His ego seems to have, kind of been tamped down over this time. And maybe those are just the lessons you learn after bouncing around for a little bit and realizing that the market the bottom has fallen out for you. And like Kyrie himself, prior to his final season in Brooklyn on that media day, I remember him saying specifically that he didn't opt into free agency or pursue that route because he knew that there was really nothing out there for him. So he knew he needed to rehab himself, and he's done a fantastic job.
Howard Beck joining us here on the Rich Eisen Show. Suzy Shuster in for Rich. Before we turn to the series for which Brockman will keep a pail between his legs, what do the Nuggets need to do to stay competitive in the West?
It's getting tougher and tougher, Suzy. We are certainly living in an era of incredible parity in the NBA. And a few weeks from now, the NBA will crown its 6th different champion in a 6-year stretch. That hasn't happened since the late 70s. And most teams that are winning the title are built around, not multiple superstars. We are long past the superstar or the super team era. It's now, usually one supreme star and a bunch of really well-calibrated role players around him, right? The Giannis Bucks were like that. The Kawhi Leonard Raptors were like that. The Jokic Nuggets are like that, all due respect to Jamal Murray, but he hasn't even made an all-star team yet. So your margin for error is a little bit thinner when it's one superstar plus a bunch of really good role players. And so, we saw that with the Nuggets. There's obviously, a little bit of attrition too when just you've had a long season and played into June last year. There's all of that. The new CBA makes it really tough to retain talent and to keep paying or adding talent. And the Nuggets faced that last offseason when they lost Bruce Brown and Jeff Green to free agency. They didn't really have a bench to lean on. And Michael Malone mentioned that more than once, over the last few days of the postseason and during the regular season even. So what do? They're not going to have a lot of tools at their disposal to add in free agency this summer unless guys want to come there for minimum contracts, which maybe, playing with Jokic is a lot of fun and gives you a chance to chase a title. So that could happen. The really interesting scenario would be, do you trade one of your core pieces? Michael Porter Jr. is making a lot of money, 35 to 40 million over the next few years. And, could you trade him for 2 to 3 pieces to help replenish the rotation? But they also have, another looming concern, which is that Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, who was the critical last piece of that starting lineup that they acquired before they won the championship, he can opt out in this summer and almost certainly will. And he's a great 3-and-D player who's won championships with 2 different teams and who's going to be, heavily pursued and recruited. So if they lose KCP, they're going to have an even tougher uphill battle than what you're alluding to right now. But it's going to be tough regardless because Dallas isn't going anywhere. Minnesota's not going anywhere. The Oklahoma City Thunder, who the Mavericks beat, they're very, very young and only getting better and with plenty of flexibility to keep building. So, yeah, it's going to be tough for the Nuggets.
The Ringer's Howard Beck right here on the Rich Eisen Show. Boston hasn't won a championship in 15 years. And before that, the last time they won, I was a freshman in high school in Boston. Is this the year?
It very well could be. I think we've all had them pegged as the Eastern Conference champion since, July. So if they falter now against a Pacers team that was a 6th seed and that is young and that was not even expected to be anywhere near this deep in the postseason, that would be a colossal failure. The question has always been, if the Celtics get to the finals, were they going to be good enough to beat the Denver Nuggets? Well, that problem is solved. Are they going to be good enough to beat the Timberwolves or the Mavericks? I think they could match up well with both of them. And I think if Kristaps Porzingis gets healthy some point during the course of the conference finals and is ready to play in the finals, I think the Celtics are going to be an incredibly tough opponent for either of the Western Conference teams. But I don't know, Suzy. I really don't know. The Celtics, this is their 6th conference finals in the last, I think, 8 years, which is incredible. It is the most successful overall run of any team and the most consistent by far. And that Tatum and Brown tandem has been incredible at their best. But they have these like glitches at times, right? Sometimes it's a quarter, sometimes it's a game, sometimes it's a series. And they, I think everybody kind of looks at them with admiration for their talent and everything that they've done, but with a little bit of skepticism or suspicion because they have these untimely pratfalls. They had more talent than the Warriors 2 years ago in the finals, and by a lot of measures, maybe should have won that series. And now they're a little bit older. They're a little more experienced. They're a little bit, I think, deeper and better built. And especially if they have Porzingis, they will be in much better shape to try to win a championship in a couple of weeks than they were 2 years ago.
Hey, Howard, I'm a Celtics fan, so I watch these games with frustration and, anticipation. Like you said, they do a lot of dumb things. They give a lot of games away, kind of careless the way they play at times. What is the opinion of Joe Mazzulla? Do you think he's done a great job? Does he get enough credit because he's kind of coaching a quote-unquote super team? What is your assessment of him in year two?
Mazzulla's in an interesting spot, right? Because, as we know, 2 summers ago, he's thrust into the spotlight into this job when Ime Udoka had to step down, and he didn't have, much in the way of experience at the NBA level or period. And it was a bumpy, I think, first year for him. And I'm sure you, like a lot of Celtics fans, were ready to throw him overboard at times. I think he's acquitted himself really well in year two. He's more comfortable. He has, I think, managed, a rotation that is filled with talent, right? It's not a super team by traditional standards, but 2 stars, a bunch of other guys who have been stars or have star capability. And I think he's managed it all really well. I think he's grown into the role. I think that he could probably stand to be a little bit more, loose, personable in his interactions with the media, because I think part of the tension or the skepticism of him has been that the way he presents sometimes is a little uptight and very self-serious. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't necessarily matter for a head coach, but, public relations kind of matters too. Messaging matters. And I think people, when they see that, they wonder, well, my God, if you feel this uptight in your press conferences, what are you like in the locker room? And so, I think it also is a case where when you're young and in that job and in that role, with all the pressure and all the expectations and spotlight that comes with that job in particular, it's also understandable. And I think it takes time to get comfortable enough in yourself and in that role to maybe let your guard down a little bit.
Well, and you're following up Ime, who I always said he was the toughest player on the team, and he was the head coach, and he wasn't exactly Mr. Nice Guy.
Suzy Shuster and I covered Ime Udoka in Laker training camp about 100 years ago, so there's that.
I mean, we covered a lot of crazy stories together. How many do we have that were like, we had some good JR Ryder stories. We had a lot of weird stuff going on when we covered the team. Speaking of which, the headlines out here are saying that LeBron is not involved in the Lakers head coaching search. Who are we kidding, right? That's like ridiculous, right? Of course he is.
There's a lot of wiggle room in there. What does not involved mean? All right, he's probably not in Rob Pelinka's office, like putting names on the dry erase board, but
no, he has a button that he presses, and he probably shows up like a Jetsons, like on the screen in Rob Pelinka's office. Who are we kidding?
I like the idea of like hologram LeBron just kind of pops in every so often.
100%. Rob, LeBron is on the hologram.
I think it would be ludicrous to think in today's NBA, with as much power as superstars have and have deserved most of the time, that you're not at least making a call and consulting. Like, before Rob Pelinka makes his list of finalists, it would be foolish not to, at least, if not talk to LeBron directly, then at least to talk to the people who talk to LeBron and get a feel for, somebody, because you don't want to hire somebody who he's absolutely opposed to or absolutely has no respect for. You don't necessarily need to choose somebody at LeBron's request either, but the idea that he's not involved at all, certainly strains credulity.
TJ?
Hey, Howard, what's up? I'm a Sixers fan and I'm a Clippers fan, so it's not always that great for me. So I don't want to talk about both of them right now. I'm going to specify the Sixers. They got almost $59 million in cap space next year, right? What's the word, man? Can you help me feel good about this offseason? Who can you see the Sixers signing to help Embiid and Maxey go to the next level?
Admittedly, I have not dug that deep into it yet, but it's funny that your combination of teams, it's the Sixers and Clippers, who the Sixers might want to be poaching a star from.
Right.
Outside of the Paul George scenario, it's a little difficult. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, who I mentioned earlier, would be a fantastic addition to the Sixers. He'd be a fantastic addition just about anywhere. And I think the one thing to keep an eye on, Daryl Morey's pretty shrewd about this stuff, and he knows as well as anybody we haven't seen a lot of superstars or even second-tier stars change teams in free agency in recent years. Most of those changes have been via forced trades. We are in an environment where, again, as I alluded to earlier, the new CBA that kicked in a year ago and more of those restrictions have kicked in since makes it really tough for the high spenders to keep spending. And so teams are going to have to probably shed salary. And when you have cap room, when you're one of the few teams below the cap, and by a lot in the case of the Sixers, you can make unbalanced trades in terms of the salary cap. You can acquire a lot of salary. So I suspect, and I have not asked, but I suspect that the Sixers are thinking, yeah, let's go chase Paul George or Kentavious Caldwell-Pope or whoever else may be a top tier or second tier free agent or a combination thereof. But we're also going to see an offseason here, I think, where teams are going to be forced to shed players that they would rather keep. And the Sixers will be in a great position to say, hey, we are your cap relief. We've got, a couple of smaller, contracts to send you or some picks or whatever it may be. And I will say with some confidence, I don't like predictions, but I will predict with some confidence that by mid-July, the Sixers will have restocked pretty well around Embiid and Maxey. I don't know who it's going to be. It's going to be somebody.
So I should hold out hope then.
You should hold out hope for the Sixers. I don't know what to think about your Clippers, especially if your Sixers get your Clippers' second best player.
We'll save that for the next time you call in, Howard.
I got one last Lakers question. It's such a weird question. Do you think people even want that job the way they used to want that job? It comes with a little bit of a headache. Don't you think? I think it's a really complicated question.
Suzy, I think it goes back to the old cliche that you and I have heard 8 billion times, which is that there's only 30 of these jobs, and the Lakers among those jobs is even in the worst of times, and this is definitely not the worst of times, right? Like they've had some really rough periods, but even in the worst of times, the Lakers job is the Lakers job. It is still a glamour team in a glamour city, and yeah, it comes with a lot of pressure and a lot of scrutiny. And it comes with the knowledge that the last couple of coaches have not lasted very long. One of them, despite winning a championship, Frank Vogel. So, you go in eyes wide open if you're taking that job, of course, and you get whatever assurances you can. But I will say this. I have much more concern for the Lakers in terms of what they do with the roster than what they do at the head coaching spot. Mm-hmm. I think Darvin Ham, for any flaws that people will point to, and I know Laker fans will point to many, Darvin Ham was a perfectly capable coach. Frank Vogel was a clearly capable coach and won them a championship. That they both got fired is at least in large part due to the fact that the Lakers did not sustain the championship core that they had around LeBron James and Anthony Davis. And so I have much more concern with the way the front office has operated over the last few years, both with regard to coaches and with regard to roster building, than I do with who's going to ultimately sit in that seat and draw up plays.
Yep. I hear you. Howard, thank you again for your time. Love having you on as always.
Suzy, always a pleasure. Say hi to Rich for me.
I will do that indeed. Doesn't Howard look like he's at a rave somewhere, by the way? In the background, he's about to head out clubbing for the night.
I assure you I'm not.
I only wish you.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.